Hey everybody, this is your local idiot. I had a little tiny thought. Um, I've been listening to, I guess, interviews like on the street or something like that of young people that are old enough to vote, but these are college students even. So I'm sad about this, but they're remarking that they don't know who they want to vote for or if they're even going to vote because they either don't feel like they're represented, young people are represented by either candidate, or heard one person say that they're going to eat all the meat and throw away the bones. They're going to figure it out their best because they're not positive about anybody. And these are, like I say, these are college students. So, I mean, we're not talking about, people that are borderline, you know, low IQ types or whatever, hopefully. But my first election that I voted in, presidential election that I voted in, was for George Bush Sr. against maybe Dukakis or something. I can't remember. But anyway, I voted for George Bush Sr. The main reason was I was in the military, and George Bush Sr. said, "Hey, we're going to give the military a 10% raise." I have no idea if it actually even happened. I don't remember, but I do remember that was my kind of my the straw that broke the camel's back on it. But the different, I looked at the two, and one of them had lots and lots and lots of lifetime of public service, basically for the most part, and the other one didn't, had less so. It was basically their records. One was better than the other. Nobody was perfect. There's no such thing. When Ronald Reagan hired or ran with George Bush Sr. To be his vice president, Ronald Reagan was a very popular guy. He was a former actor and, kind of a, you know, he had the gab down. He could really talk. He was even known as the great communicator. But bottom line is, he could speak. He was a good orator. And George Bush Sr., always had the impression of him as kind of a wimp. He had the sort of a nasally voice and all this kind of stuff. Later, so I really didn't know a ton about him, but later when I got a chance to really listen to some of the speeches, especially the things that he was talking about that weren't canned, I mean, when he was speaking off the cuff, I realized what a decent man he was. I didn't know before, but in all the years that he was a vice president, and then later when he was president, he really was a decent human being. Now, did I agree with all of his, politics? Not necessarily, because I believe in more I lean toward a government that is, I guess, a little more liberal. And I mean, Abraham Lincoln was a liberal president, even though he was basically the beginning of the Republican Party. The Republican Party has changed tremendously since it started. And, Eisenhower was a Republican, but he was a decent human being. And he did really great things for the country. He had put in all the interstate highways and a ton of other infrastructure stuff, which gave tons and tons of people really good paying jobs and skills. And when all those people were doing the highway stuff, there was a lot of room left for other people in other areas. And so he did great things. I lean more toward liberal leaders because a liberal leader has more compassion. They have more empathy for their fellow human being. It's not, it's still always going to be a battle between the rich and the poor, which all leadership, all everything has always been that way. I mean, way before what we consider politics, like American politics, it's always been a thing about the rich against the poor. You know, um, Democrats have always represented the workers, farmers who at one time were kind of low on the totem pole, just workers. People that were laborers at factories or on the docks or whatever. And later, when those people were allowed to create unions and stuff like this, the Democratic Party backed them. The Republican Party always backed big business. The idea was if you were wealthy and if you owned a factory or, a lot of factories or land and all that kind of stuff, you were Republican for the most part, because the Republican Party believed in that kind of the theory of the trickle-down theory, which in theory, when you think about or when it's talked about, sounds brilliant in my opinion, but it's a failed theory in that it doesn't work. The wealthy, when they give them big old tax breaks and all that kind of stuff, the really wealthy that own the factories, own businesses or whatever, they buy back stock, which means that they don't pass it along to the customers. They don't pass it along to the workers. They keep it. I mean, the bottom line is if you're a billionaire, you are a money hoarder. You're good at making money, but you don't do anything with it. You just stack it up. It's kind of like people that never ever throw away a newspaper and they stack them up in their house and then pretty soon there's nowhere to walk. Hoarders are mentally ill. It's a mental illness and it's sad, but billionaires, every single billionaire is a money hoarder. And they have very little compassion for their fellow man, because if they did have compassion for their fellow man, they'd be doing more. They wouldn't necessarily even have the ability to be a hoarder or the desire really to be a billionaire, because they would be starting businesses that are only designed to support themselves. The billionaire wouldn't necessarily be making a great, huge profit. There wouldn't be this awesome thing where you're getting never-ending amounts of investors and stuff, and that's not the big goal. The big goal would be to do things for people, to help people. There's a complete lack of that in the Republican Party, and there has been for quite some time. That's why there's a gigantic gap these days between the wealthy and the poor. There's very few people that can consider themselves middle class. Because as I hear all the time from people, between myself and my husband, we make $80,000 a year and we still can't afford to do anything. Now, from a economic standpoint, that's partially true. Part of it is too, though, there are more ways to spend money today than there ever were 50 years ago. I mean, just the advent of computers, online shopping, cable TV, satellite phones, God forbid, and the cell phone services. If somebody had told me 35 years ago that I'd be spending like $100 a month on a phone, I'd be saying, you're nuts, man. I mean, back in the day, your phone bill was like $12 a month, if that. And we are constantly given more opportunities to waste money. I mean, I have student loans. I owe probably like $38,000 on student loans, and I'm really lucky that's all it is. I'm going to college still, and I've almost got my master's degree in business, an MBA, and so I'm not paying on it right now because it's deferred until I'm done with college and get an actual job that can help me pay for that bill, but. If you want to make any money these days or have a real future, you're going to have to get at least a master's degree. When I was a kid, graduating high school, you needed a bachelor's degree to do well, And eventually, all those people that got bachelor's degrees either progressed in their work and earned master's degrees also to advance, or they basically got up to the top of where they can work with a bachelor's degree, and they've stuck there for the rest of their life, and it's limiting. Okay, so if you're going to college, which shouldn't even be an if, the word if should be gigantic there, meaning that you should always go to college. It's stupid not to. And I was one of the people that I tried I went to college, got a lot of basic stuff knocked out, but then every time I tried to specialize and go beyond like an associate's degree, I kept on just realizing partway through that that's not what I wanted. The thing was that I was studying was going to be something I didn't want to be doing. Criminal justice was an example. Then I wanted to be a paramedic. And I started working in those fields, like the criminal justice. I was in a sheriff's reserve. Found out that there was a ton of people in there that loved what they did, and they were nuts. And then there were some really great people, a very small percentage, but it was really great people that were working there, but they hated what they did. And I asked them, luckily I was still very young, and I asked them, hey, if you were me, if you were my age, would you keep on doing it? And every single one of the ones I admired said no. They had no idea what the job really was, and they had no idea that everybody you'd be working with, for the most part, were these nut jobs. I mean, it's a tough job. And so, law enforcement in general, you're always dealing with people who are having their worst possible day because they're, and that's why you're there, whether they're on the aggressor side or the person is being wronged. And eventually that rubs off on you. And a defense mechanism, which is really common, is you just sort of shut off your emotions to that. And pretty soon you're a cold fish. You just don't, when people are suffering around you, you don't much care. And eventually it's, you don't have the kind of empathy that you started out with. And you don't have the kind of empathy that other people have that have never been exposed to that stuff. So I don't fault a lot of people that are police officers and that or not just police officers, lots of different kinds of law enforcement that have lost some of their give a shit, their empathy, because the job steals it from you. And I'm really glad I saw that when I was very, very young and just starting out. And so I went towards something else, and I followed other people's advice. And one of the luckiest things I ever did. But all these people that are, like I say, especially young people, they're pretty impressionable, I guess. I guess I probably would have been too at that age. But they're listening. I think they're listening to the wrong people. And I don't know who these people are that are telling them this. I've actually seen a couple of people that I thought were pretty intelligent that are telling people, don't vote for somebody if you don't really 100%. And that's so terrible. I have almost never been able to vote for somebody that I knew 100% was awesome. The first time I voted for Barack Obama, obviously I was just so lucky. And like everybody else, I wanted to be a black president, for the first time, right? But I was going to vote for John McCain before that. I had planned on it because I knew about John McCain. He was not, like I say, I didn't really agree with his politics, and I didn't really agree with a lot of the things that he believed or whatever, but I knew that he was a decent human being. And he proved it over and over again that he was a really decent human being. And I was going to vote for him. And then when he chose Sarah Palin to run with him, and I didn't research her right away or anything like that, but I started seeing stuff, and then I started, I was like, really? And so I started kind of digging into her a little bit, and a little bit of her record, a little bit of her as a governor and stuff like that. And I realized, oh my God, she is a bonehead. I mean, bad. And, this person, and John McCain was really old, and he had issues. He would have lived, apparently, according to, record eventually, but I didn't know that. He was really old enough, and it was dangerous, and she was going to be getting a lot of authority, if possibly. And so I couldn't vote for her. I couldn't vote for him because of her. It was just a bad choice of VP. So I voted for Barack Obama. I mean, I started really doing some research on Barack Obama at that point, and he had a record, not a big record, but a record. And once he was elected, I found out that I had made a really good decision because he was just an outstanding human being, still is. Best president I've ever voted for. But guess what? He was not perfect. My little brother, who I love and admire, really great guy. One problem though, he's a White Sox fan. How the hell I'm a Cubs fan, and he's a White Sox fan. I don't understand what happened to him, but when I left home, he was still home, and so obviously something happened to him. But anyway, so somehow he became a White Sox fan, and he's also a Republican. And I really don't know how that happened either, other than I guess I know how. My grandfather, my mom's dad, was a lifer Navy guy. My dad was gonna be a lifer Navy guy until the Navy just fucked him over, and so he only made it a few, like 12, 13, 14 years. And he was on submarines for 12 years, and I think he taught for a couple of years. But the submarine he was on, he was lucky enough to get off the boat, and then 2 days later it sank and killed all of his friends. Right? It was sunk by the Soviet Union as revenge of something stupid. But and it ruined him. I mean, all of his friends are gone. There's all these hearings. And everything, and so my grandfather on my mom's side. So obviously, my mom liked sailors, right? She was around that. One of her brothers was a sailor, and my grandfather was smart enough to basically make a career out of it, which was brilliant in my opinion. Anybody who makes a career out of the military is brilliant. I did not do it because I'm a moron. I'm an idiot, as I announced to everybody in the beginning of this. And I have never not regretted doing my 20. I've regretted not doing my 20 my whole life. I did 4 years. I wasted the rest of it. I mean, I saw the world, did all kinds of stuff on my own terms, not because somebody else told me I had to, but I've got a buddy that basically we started out at the same time, both enlisted, same basic background. And he put in 29 years. Had a storied career, and I admire him almost more than any other human being that I've ever met. And it wasn't without difficulty or trouble, but and he got out. He makes more money now than I will ever make in my entire life in his retirement. But he's not a Republican. But the thing is, a lot of military people just automatically are. My grandfather was a Republican because he was in the Navy. The Republican Party, a long time ago, set it up, said, hey, there's certain things that we can do to get like automatic votes. So they started really marketing toward the military, convincing people that if you want everything you need in the military, you have to vote for a Republican president. It's bogus. Republican presidents haven't been any better to the military than anybody else. But like Eisenhower was a general, and he was a Republican. So anyway, so my little brother's a Republican also, and because of the military stuff, he spent like 12 years in the Air Force, and then he got out and got a master's degree, and then decided to go back in the military, and this time into the Navy. So he's like the youngest officer of his grade that I've ever heard of, because he's an old guy. I mean, I should say he's the oldest officer in his grade, rather. But he's in the Navy now, and I admire the kid a lot. He's not a kid; he's in his 40s, but he's not hardcore though. He doesn't support Trump. He knows Trump's some fucking crazy person, like anybody would. But these people that are saying that they're not sure who they're gonna vote for because nobody's perfect. My point of making this whole video is that in all the years that I voted, and I've never not voted for president. I've never skipped an election. That's something only a really stupid person would do, is skip an election. And I've done really stupid things in my life, but I thank God I'm not that stupid. I'm somebody that recognizes my own faults, and I kind of like to make fun of them a little bit too, because when I see other idiots doing idiotic stuff, it embarrasses me and everything else. I'm an idiot too. They do different stuff than me, but a lot of us are idiots. But at least I can say I never bought Trump's bullshit. I mean, partly because in the 90s, I met a guy that I worked with that had worked for a contractor in New York that the company was ruined by Trump not paying his bill. And and the guy said specifically, he was totally plugged in on, he said specifically it became really obvious after the work was done and everything that he had never planned on paying the bill. And that they had found out after the fact that he had a big habit of not paying his bills. I was in construction, and eventually owned my own contracting company. And so I know how hard it could be. Once you've laid out materials and wages and all this kind of stuff, you really can go in the hole temporarily until the bill's paid, and then you pay all that back up. And those cycles are what makes a company succeed. The trick is though, people got to pay their bills. And Donald Trump has made a career out of cutting corners and stuff like this. And one of the corners that he cuts is he doesn't pay his contractors. And not just because they don't do a good job. It's because that's his MO. He makes it a point not to pay his contractors. He knows he's not going to do it. And so when he's looking for contractors, he only hires little companies, new companies to do these different things. They do their work. The work is inspected by, the local establishment, and it passes. And then he doesn't pay them. He uses some excuse to not pay them. And the guy that I was talking about that I met, that I used to work with on the West Coast, the company that he worked for was one of those kinds, and the business went out of business because they owed it. They're in that cycle. They owed a ton of money for all the materials that they had used, and also the wages for the crews. And then when it came time for them to be able to pay that to their to the stores and to the guys, Trump wouldn't pay. And so he had the ability, and then the next thing was they put a lien on his stuff, but then he had lawyers up the wazoo that sued the company, and the bottom line was he had this ability to make things take for long enough to where that no matter what, the creditors eventually said, well, that's your problem, not ours. And so it ruined that company. Well, so I started out knowing about this, and I never got into his television shows or anything. I never was that impressed by the guy. He seemed like he was all like he was just an entertainer, like he was just for show, fugazi. Anyway, so one of the things I'm proud about in my life that I never fell for Trump's bullshit. And it turns out I know a lot of people that fell for it simply because they're Republicans, and the Republican Party chose them, and I know why. It's been a really big learning curve for me, but I know why all that happened. It's a horrible trick on the Republican Party. And now the Republican Party has been transformed because the wrong element has been voted in by certain Republicans and certain people that actually never even got involved in politics before, like hardcore racists and hardcore stupid people and stuff like this, suddenly came out of the woodwork and started voting because certain groups really started marketing toward them. So hardcore religious people like evangelicals were marketed to, and that's for a long, long time. And the big business people, the people that want to make millions or billions or whatever, they're all for it. And it rightly so. It was smart for them because look what Trump did during his presidency, his short little presidency. He put forth a tax change that tremendously benefited people in the millionaire billionaire category, people over $500,000 a year kinds, people I don't know. And So it really did. It was a great investment for those people. Working people, normal people, the people that make this country run, saw none of that money ever, and they never would. It just made the noose on poor people, which is everybody. If you're not rich, you're poor these days, because there's no middle anymore. But the noose got tighter. People that feel like they should be making plenty of money, but it doesn't buy as much as it used to. I promise you, that was a plan. That was part of a plan, and it's not done yet. You keep on electing Republicans or anybody even like that, people that are all about the money, and you will eventually be homeless. The West Coast and everywhere else, there's homeless people. Studies have been done and found that the people that are homeless aren't moving into there because they just love the area. They're from the area. It's just that they're low-income people. They're the workers in the area. And so pretty soon property values and crazy lending tactics and stuff like that tricks are being played on people. And they get bounced out of their houses, bounced out of their apartments, and they end up RVing it in some POS RV or whatever, tents. So it's the rich people that are involved. I mean, some of them aren't even a millionaire. You know, the people that make good money. Some of the people that make really good money that are in retirement or living on the West Coast or wherever, where that there's homeless people around, some of them are going to price themselves out of really important stuff. Like, you like to go to restaurants, you like to go to stores or whatever. The people that work at those restaurants, work at those stores, the mechanic that fixes your car, all those things, any of those people can become homeless. And if they have to leave that area because it's too expensive to live, who's going to work in your stores? Who's going to be the nurse, at your hospital? Who's going to be the person that works at your local department store, or grocery store? I mean, where are those people going to live if they're not going to be homeless? Because LA, Seattle, Portland, Oregon, all over the place. Every city that's like that has got a gigantic homeless population. Those people have jobs, most of them, and they work at those places. They're priced out for their wage no longer matches what the income is required to live in those places. So the rich people that are retiring there or living there doing really, really well are going to price themselves out of help. That'll be interesting when all the help people move to some place that is more affordable. The places that aren't so awesome, like Iowa, where I'm living right now, where it's cheaper to live because it's not as nice. No palm trees here. And all that's happening, every bit of that is happening because of billionaires are out for themselves to make money, and they're electing Republicans who only care about that also. And they're the kind of people like Ted Cruz and all that who are taking the money, the bribes and everything else, and whatever gun manufacturers are given to them so they can vote, gun laws that are basically no gun control whatsoever. And all these nutballs are getting a hold of, weapons of war. Even if they're not automatic, they're still weapons of war. And going into schools or whatever. I mean, I think it's hilarious that Trump's been shot at or almost shot at twice by the kind of people that his entire group is making sure have weapons. That's just so stupid. Every kind of AR-15 or any weapon of war, the weapons that are made with mags and to be fired rapidly without jamming, which is every AR and that kind of weapon, those weapons need to be Class 3 weapons. You need to be able to pass a good background and a psych test. The kind of stuff. I mean, even a Class 3, no psychiatrist has to see you or whatever, which is nuts. You can own a machine gun. But there's a lot more scrutiny. And because of it, there's a lot less nutballs that are that are getting class 3 weapons and shooting something up, rather than just, Joe Schmo that, picks up an AR or an AK-47 and then, tries to shoot people up. Every president I've ever voted for was the best of the both person, the lesser of two evils. Before Harris was took over, I'm really grateful to President Biden for doing what he did. Only he could have done it. We would have lost the election. It's possible we would have lost the election. It was iffy. As it is now, it's not even iffy. We're not going to lose the election. It's going to be, and when I say we, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I voted for both over time. I go for the best person. I don't go for the party. I know people that do party line, but I'll tell you right now, I will say this. They have made me into a party person. Even though I'm not affiliated with any party, I will never vote for a Republican again. I can't even picture it. Every Republican that I know of now is just an absolute piece of shit. There's a couple of people in my local town that I've known for decades who I admire. And I still won't vote for them, though, because now my concern is that anybody that votes any kind of party line or helps out any national anything for Republicans is going to make sure that working people, normal people, get fucked over. It's just, and every single national level, a Republican politician is just an absolute scumbag. Even like Lindsey Graham, totally, he's kind of like, I thought he was a better person at one time because he was actually a friend of John McCain's. John McCain was the last, what I consider, decent Republican. Dick Cheney's daughter, she kind of got pigeonholed into where she's at, but she's sticking to her guns, which I admire. But she's not a good human being, I don't think. She just wound up on the wrong side of Trump. Same thing happened with Mitt Romney. I voted against him in an election, not because he was a Republican, but because he stood for too many things that weren't as good. And like I say, Obama has been I voted for Bill Clinton, and even though Bill Clinton did a bunch of stuff that hurt me, I couldn't transfer from the National Guard to the regular Army, which I had planned on. I had gotten conned into doing that because I was told you can transfer. But then when my first sergeant wouldn't let me transfer, he did a stop loss on me for basically 3 years. And as you know, in the National Guard, you're only a part-time soldier. And so you have to be able to find a job in your local area to support yourself. And at the time, it was in the 80s and early 90s. In my local area in the Midwest, there was nothing. I just couldn't find a decent job. It was pizza place stuff or, restaurant service workers or gas stations or something like that. I couldn't find a decent job. And so after years of trying to and being stuck in my town, finally I got a job offer that my brother got me in New Orleans working on towboats. And it was paying substantially more money. My father had died. My mom still had kids at home, and she needed help too. And that was another motivator, And my first sergeant would not let me transfer no matter what. So finally, when I got this opportunity, I told my first sergeant, and he understood that he couldn't let me go. He couldn't let me transfer because he was doing a stop loss on me, which means he was also doing a stop loss on other people too. So he couldn't let me transfer because it would have gotten out, I guess. I'm trying to assume the best of the guy, but so I had to get out of the National Guard under a hardship discharge, which is an honorable discharge, but it's called a general discharge. It's honorable. It's a general discharge under honorable conditions. And then later, I almost went back into the military. I almost was able to go into the regular Army after 9/11. And my wife ended up saying she wanted a divorce and stuff. So it threw me off, threw the train off the tracks. and I didn't end up going back in. I regret that now. But hindsight's always 20/20. But life is full of tough decisions. Life is full of them. And I've made more bad decisions than anybody I've ever met, I think. But when I voted for George Bush Sr., he won. And I was happy about that because he turned out to be a good man. And, even though he only lasted one term, Bill Clinton came around and I did a bunch of research on him. And what was available to me at the time was good. We needed some serious help in getting rid of the national debt, which Ronald Reagan had really driven up into a nutty level, except there was a good reason for that. He defeated the Soviet Union, which is it was a huge win for the world, not just for America. The Soviet Union was dangerous and they were causing problems, and they killed every friend my dad had when he was in the Navy. And that was not my motivation, the thing with my dad. But that was a symptom of the rest of the stuff they were doing to the world. They were a cancer to the world, and they were defeated by Ronald Reagan, who had to drive up a big national debt to do it. Then it had to be fixed. Clinton came in and started fixing it. But when he was fixing it, one of the things he did was he closed a whole bunch of unnecessary, redundant military posts, bases, and other wasteful, idiotic government expenditures. And he wouldn't take in any prior service people. That was the thing that got me. But it was a good thing. He got rid of the debt. And even before, in 8 years that he was president, got rid of the debt and even stacked up a little bit of a surplus, which meant, extra money that we could spend down the road, which we should always be in the position of having extra money. Look at your household. You don't want to be never ending in debt. You want to have everything paid off and even have a little savings account. Well, that's what Clinton did for us. And then, of course, Clinton fucked up by couldn't keep his dick in his pants, and then lied, and he embarrassed America, which to me, there's very little that's worse than doing something like that. I mean, I was going to end up going into Ranger Battalion. That was part of my plan, when I was being in the military. And so I ended up memorizing the Ranger Creed and all this because, if you don't know that kind of stuff, you don't advance. And in the Ranger Creed, which I don't remember everything anymore, there is a line about it, and I will not embarrass my country. It's important enough to where that they make every single one of those guys and women memorize every line of that creed, which is long, including I will not embarrass my country. Well, that's what Clinton did. He embarrassed his country. That was a major problem, and it still to this day has cost his wife an election. She caused the election too, because she's kind of a terrible person. She wasn't a long time ago. Back in the day when he was president, she was actually a really decent person, but her life after that got really crappy. Thanks, Bill. And the next guy that got elected, I did not vote for. I didn't like, President Clinton's vice president ran against George Bush Jr., George W. Bush, and I did not like him. He had too many weird ideas. His wife was a big-time activist and hardcore religious, and those are never good things to mix with politics, in my opinion. And he had some real big weaknesses, I thought. But he wasn't anywhere near as bad as George W. Bush. And it turns out later, George W. Bush is actually a decent human being. Terrible decision maker, in my opinion. And he was also letting people like Dick Cheney, who was in my when I was in the military, he was part of my my command structure. He was the Secretary of Defense or whatever. And so I basically was kind of brainwashed into admiring him until I learned after George Bush got elected that he was just Satan. He put us into a war just so that his company could make a bunch of money, which meant he made a bunch of money. Even though he divested himself from the company, I guarantee you he made billions off of that. Ugh. And it cost so many lives. And we wasted so much money and 20 years on a war that we couldn't figure out how to get out of. I mean, really, the exit strategy on something like that is a big clusterfuck. Anybody that doesn't know about that, look how we got out of Vietnam. Then advance forward, wait 20 years, and look what it looked like when we got out of the Middle East. Look what it looked like when the Soviet Union got out of the Middle East. Getting out of a war can suck balls. And it sucks. It costs, and there was no way to do it until finally Biden did it. And then to this day, he's catching shit for it because there was just no perfect way to do it. Nobody else had the courage to pull that sliver out, because it hurts when you pull it out. But there's no way to heal it until you pull it out either. So it is what it is. Stop looking for a perfect candidate. There is no such thing. There's no such thing. I'm most proud of my entire lifetime of voting for Barack Obama. And when I voted for him the second time also, I knew who he was. And so I really did that on purpose. My little brother, who's a Republican, doesn't like Barack Obama and complains about all the mistakes he made. And of course he made mistakes. There's no such thing as a presidency without mistakes. You know what? At least he kept his dick in his pants, and didn't embarrass America. But yeah, he made some mistakes. A lot of really tough decisions happen when you're the president. And nobody wants to be involved in those quagmires. Ronald Reagan made some really terrible decisions. At the same time, given that situation, a lot of people would have made those choices. So I don't envy anybody being the president and having to make decisions like that. The difference is, at least, the only president of my entire lifetime that has purposefully made decisions that would hurt America because it was going to make him money or keep him out of hot water was Donald Trump. I never saw him coming for being president, for running for anything really, but it happened. And a lot of people voted for him because he was Republican, and they were Republican in their voting party line. And it was a disaster. He sent George W. Bush got rid of the surplus that Bill Clinton had caused and put us in pretty bad debt again. Any war that you're ever in is going to put you in bad debt. But then when Barack Obama got in and literally saved our entire economy, we were about to go into another Great Depression like 1929. And because Republicans spend money, even though they always caterwaul, they always complain about, got to be more responsible. They never do it when they're in at all. They complain about it and talk about it as if it's a thing, but they never actually do it themselves. Spend money wisely. They always rack up a giant debt, 9 times out of 10 get us into a war. All I can say about Trump's presidency is that he didn't get us into a new war that I know of, or maybe I'm not thinking about it. And I'm not looking for things to pick on him about. There's too many things that he actually did. I don't have to look for anything. But he's the worst pariah that ever happened to America. And there was a lot of people we could point fingers at before that. There's been Democratic presidents that did a bad job in certain things. Bill Clinton embarrassed America. He did a great job. He was a brilliant man in a lot of ways, but he was also a bad man in some ways. Jimmy Carter, great human being, probably one of the best human beings that ever sat in that office. Not that great of a president, and also he was dealing with some really underhanded stuff on the other side. President Reagan and the Republican establishment did some really underhanded shit to get Reagan elected. Um, and the Republican Party has been doing that for a very, very, very long time. The last 120 something years that I know of. And we're standing on the precipice again of choosing, one or the other again. And I'm hearing these young people that are supposed to be smart say they don't know whether they're going to choose Kamala Harris or not because of something. There's no such thing as a perfect candidate. You're always, always, always choosing the lesser of two evils. Just be smart and learn that. Figure that out. I'm not a smart man, but at least I figured that out. Choose the right one. Choose the lesser of two evils. And I'm looking forward to having the first woman president, having the first woman president of color, for that matter. We need to have a lot more people of color in that office, and we need to have a lot more women in that office. I think after Kamala Harris, it'll be tough for guys to get elected, in my opinion. But she's a brilliant human being, and she's been in service of this country her entire career. Please do the right thing and elect her. Vote for her. At least vote. And even if you vote for Trump, at least you voted. But yeah, the main thing is start using critical thinking. Critical thinking. And don't go all nutty, Trumpers, with the critical race theory thing. Critical thinking. Anybody who's ever even been curious about how to do smart stuff, use critical thinking, and you will choose the right thing to do. So anyway, that's my 2 cents and probably a few more cents than that, but I have none. I have no sense at all. I'm broke. I'm a regular person, not a rich person. So anyway, have a great day and think critically.